I made the prettiest 1940s inspired summer dress ever, and this is the sewing process. I've since posted a couple of pictures of this dress on my Instagram profile, and people keep asking which pattern I used. And the truth is, this dress is self-drafted, inspired by a couple of different examples on Pinterest, some eyeballing, and an insane amount of luck, because at the end I kind of ran out of fabric, but we still managed, so it's all good. Anyway, I'll try to show the process as clearly as possible, and I hope this helps if you want to recreate something similar. Alright, so this is the fabric I'm going to be using. It's a beautiful black floral cotton print, and I've only got about 2 meters of it, which in hindsight wasn't the best idea I ever had. For premium vintage vibes, I really wanted this dress to have some lace incorporated into the design somewhere. So I took out my thrifted bag of lace remnants and started to see which one looked best. In the end, I decided to go with this beautiful narrow yellow lace, which in my opinion just brings out the flowers on the fabric so beautifully. And then I got to work. For once, at least to begin with, I managed to finally follow the vintage sewing advice to put on a pretty dress and some lipstick. I managed to keep that up for about 30 seconds, but here's me getting started wearing a pretty dress to begin with. I wanted the skirt to be fairly narrow and slightly flared at the bottom. Now the way to achieve this is to start by measuring your waist and figuring out the length of your skirt, as well as at which point you want the skirt to begin to flare. I created my skirt from 6 panels, and I am going to put some measurements here in case you want to recreate this. You might just have to adjust the waist measurement and the length according to your needs. There's a plot twist with my skirt though, since I wanted this dress to be princess line. So I elongated my skirt panels accordingly to reach to just under my bust. If you know how to use a basic bodice pattern block, you see that most of them have darts, so you are going to basically do a reverse dart in the sense that your skirt pieces need to get slightly wider towards the top as you move into your ribcage area. So here I've got my 6 skirt panels. Let's sew them together. I really like the pointed underbust design that so many dresses from the 30s and 40s have, so I cut out my skirt panels accordingly, making the top curve upwards into that iconic pointed shape as well. The top was self-drafted and kind of fitted on myself, and also I was running dangerously low on fabric at this point. So what I wanted to do here was to give myself a shallow sweetheart neckline, and it took a little bit of trying out different things before I finally managed to get the fabric to behave in a way that I liked. So I started off with a rectangular piece of fabric that should be long enough to reach from your shoulders to under your bust, and then wide enough to reach across your bust from side seam to side seam. I then cut out a V-neck to begin with, and I had initially planned to gather part of that to create the sweetheart neckline, but that did not work since the fabric was draping in a weird way. It might work with a more lightweight fabric, but my weight of fabric just didn't cooperate. So instead, seeing that I had already cut this piece slightly too short to properly reach from my shoulders to under my bust, I decided to use scrap pieces of cotton to add a little extra rectangle to the shoulders, and that automatically gave me my sweetheart neckline. But anyway, here's what it should look like in the end. And then I gathered the fabric on either side just under my bust to create a little bit of volume there and to bring the excess width down to my underbust measurements. I wanted the dress to have adorable little puffed sleeves, and again I'm going to link a puffed sleeve pattern for you below, so you don't need to figure this out by yourself. And again, the sleeves were largely improvised. In an ideal world, you would have just used a basic bag for the back of the dress, shortening it accordingly to accommodate the high-waisted or empire line skirt. And you can very easily do that with whatever pattern you have lying around, or even with some free patterns you can find on the internet. I'm going to link a couple that you might like. But at this point, sadly, I didn't have fabric for this. So I ended up piecing together my back of the bodice by adding this other strip of fabric to the initial back piece. And to be honest, back pieces are so easy to make, especially since the darts are already taken care of through the high-waisted skirt. So literally literally all you need is a sort of rectangular base again, and then cut out the armhole of that and a slight curve to give you the neckline. Then attach the skirt to the top by just folding the raw edge of the top of the skirt under and then top stitching that in place with a teeny tiny invisible back stitch by hand, since this is a lot easier, especially at the front of the dress where the pointed underbust bodice can make all sorts of difficulties if you try to sew these things right sides facing. So I decided to kind of stitch the skirt on top of the bodice, if that makes sense. I added an invisible zipper, and invisible zippers are one of my favorite things ever because I have this little invisible zipper attachment for my sewing machine, which means I can literally just pop them on so quickly, provided that I take my time to pin them correctly, which again never happens, so I still end up unpicking them about 3 times. This dress being no exception. I had this weird bulge in the back because somehow my zipper had slipped during assembly, so I did end up unpicking it, but it's so satisfying to install an invisible zipper once you get the zipper to sit straight on the dress. The skirt needed to be hemmed, obviously. So I've already hemmed this skirt once, and then I've trimmed down the seam allowance, and now we're going to fold this edge over again and go over all of this one more time. Now as for the sleeves again, they are super poofy and I wanted to just make them slightly less poofy, so I've already pinned here to show what it would look like. The sleeve is just kind of tethered to the armhole like that, so what I'll do is I will open up part of the shoulder seam and just sew the bottom part of the sleeve closer to the dress, if that makes sense. So here's the sleeve now partly detached from the dress, and I'll try to show it properly. And now what's going to happen is, instead of attaching it to the dress like this, we're going to fold a much bigger seam allowance so that there's basically zero sleeve under the armhole. So we're going to just fold this inside like so. And then we can reattach the sleeve. So you can see how the dress body itself makes a sort of diagonal going from normal seam allowance up here to much more sleeve seam allowance down at the seam of the sleeve, meaning that the sleeve just kind of runs diagonally into the bodice there. And then as a final touch, I added the lace to the neckline, and honestly guys, this lace is so adorable. I love the effect, and it's really just the icing on the cake. And I decided to also make a little belt to go with the dress, detachable of course, so I could wear it different ways. I happen to have this beautiful ornate clasp, and I just created a fabric strip with a piece of wool fabric inside to give it some structure, and I just attached my floral fabric around that wool base. And then I attached the clasp on either end. Super simple, super straightforward, but I really love having that little spare belt as well. Time for the final reveal. Honestly, I'm super happy with how this turned out. It's so cute. I also got to wear this dress out to my first ever baseball game in America, since David and I were dressing vintage for the occasion, and honestly the sunglasses were such a vibe. And I was so glad to have my little fan with me since the weather was really hot, especially by European standards. But it was just such an epic day, and I even got to keep one of the baseballs. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new around here, make sure to subscribe so that you get notified whenever I upload any new sewing shenanigans. And stay tuned because there's lots of exciting stuff coming up. So thanks for watching everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye bye!